driver was from the Corpo della Gendarmeria, the Vatican's 130-member police force. He headed westward across Rome at an unhurried pace. He doesn't know. On his mobile phone, Donati scanned the websites of the leading Italian newspapers. They were in the dark. So were their colleagues in London and New York. "Turn on the radio, Johnny." "Music, Excellency?" "News, please." It was more drivel from Saviano, another rant about how Arab and African immigrants were destroying the country, as if the Italians weren't more than capable of making a fine mess of things themselves. Saviano had been badgering the Vatican for months about a private audience with the Holy Father. Donati, with no small amount of pleasure, had refused to grant it. "That's quite enough, Johnny." The radio went blessedly silent. Donati peered out the window of the luxury German-made sedan. It was no way for a soldier of Christ to travel. He supposed this would be his final journey across Rome by chauffeured limousine. For nearly 2 decades he had served as something like the chief of staff of the Roman Catholic Church. It had been a tumultuous time. A terrorist attack on St. Peter's, a scandal involving antiquities and the Vatican museums, the scourge of priestly sexual abuse, and yet Donati had relished every minute of it. Now, in the blink of an eye, it was over. He was once again a mere priest. He had never felt more alone. The car crossed the Tiber and turned onto the Via della Conciliazione, the broad boulevard Mussolini had carved through Rome's slums. The floodlit dome of the basilica, restored to its original glory, loomed in the distance. They followed the curve of Bernini's colonnade to St. Anne's Gate, where a Swiss guard waved them onto the territory of the city-state. He was dressed in his night uniform, a blue tunic with a white schoolboy collar, knee-length socks, a black beret, a cape against the evening chill. His eyes were dry, his face untroubled. He doesn't know. The car moved slowly up the Via Sant'Anna, past the barracks of the Swiss Guard, the Church of St. Anne, the Vatican printing offices, and the Vatican Bank, before coming to a stop next to an archway leading to the San Damaso courtyard. Donati crossed the cobbles on foot, boarded the most important lift in all of Christendom, and ascended to the 3rd floor of the Apostolic Palace. He hurried along the loggia, a wall of glass on one side, a fresco on the other. A left turn brought him to the papal apartments. Another Swiss guard, this one in full dress uniform, stood straight as a ramrod outside the door. Donati walked past him without a word and went inside. Thursday, he was thinking. Why did it have to be a Thursday? 18 years, thought Donati, as he surveyed the Holy Father's private study, and nothing had changed. Only the telephone. Donati had finally managed to convince the Holy Father to replace Wojtyła's ancient rotary contraption with a modern multi-line device. Otherwise, the room was exactly the way the Pole had left it. The same austere wooden desk, the same beige chair, the same worn oriental rug, the same golden clock and crucifix. Even the blotter and pen set had belonged to Wojtyła the Great. For all the early promise of his papacy, the promise of a kinder, less repressive church, Pietro Lucchesi had never fully escaped the long shadow of its predecessor. Donati, by some instinct, marked the time on his wristwatch. It was 12:07 a.m. The Holy Father had retired to the study that evening at 8:30 for 90 minutes of reading and writing. Ordinarily, Donati remained at his master's side or just down the hall in his office. But because it was a Thursday, the one night of the week he had to himself, he had stayed only until 9 o'clock. "Do me a favor before you leave, Luigi." Lucchesi had asked Donati to open the heavy curtains covering the study's window. It was the same window from which the Holy Father prayed the Angelus each Sunday at noon. Donati had complied with his master's wishes. He had even opened the shutters so His Holiness could gaze upon St. Peter's Square while he slaved over his curial paperwork. Now the curtains were tightly drawn. Donati moved them aside. The shutters were closed, too. The desk was tidy, not Lucchesi's usual clutter. There was a cup of tea, half empty, a spoon resting on a saucer that had not been there when Donati departed.